Welcome to IEF's Conservation Chat. Thank you for coming on today. I want to introduce our IEF staff that's here on the call with us today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Julie Bates, and I am the Donor Relations Manager at IEF. I also have Chase Ledoux, our Special Projects Manager, is on. Our Executive Director, Deborah Olson, is someplace on the line. There she is. And Sarah Conley, who is on the line also, our Assistant Director of Conservation. So just a few little housekeeping things to go over before I turn it over to Sarah. Let's make sure once the presentation starts that everybody turns their cameras off and puts their microphones on mute. Having the cameras off saves bandwidth because we have people from all over the world on here today. Also, if you have questions for our speaker, please put those in the chat and we'll get to those at the end of her presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, and she's going to tell you all about our fabulous speaker.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Julie. Thank you so much for joining us. We are excited to have today's guest. We have Sarah Maisonneuve,
It's like a Maisonneuve.
founder and director of Wildlife Connection. With nearly 2 decades of experience in conservation, education, and ecological research, Sarah has led initiatives across a diverse number of ecosystems in East Africa and the United States. Her work centers on forging meaningful connections between people and nature, something I think we can all get behind. Sarah founded Wildlife Connection in 2010, working in and around Tanzania's Ruaha National Park to protect elephants and improve local livelihoods. One of their many accomplishments is running the largest beehive fence initiative in Africa. It helps mitigate human-elephant conflict, and I'm sure we'll learn more about that today. They also have HEC monitoring, teacher training, alternative livelihoods, and park visitation programs. There's so much to talk about. We are so happy to have you here. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'll say we have, as far as I know, the largest beehive fence project that utilizes locally made log hives. Little caveat, just to not only to take credit where it's due. Thank you so much for having me once again. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my background, how I came to start Wildlife Connection, the evolution of our organization, and then some of the programs that we offer. Let's see here. I guess that's not working. So I know it's a bit odd perhaps for my first slide to be of monkeys, but this is how I started my career studying blue monkeys in Western Kenya about 20 years ago. I was a field site manager out there, and this was what I did on a day-to-day basis, recorded the sometimes minute-to-minute behavior of blue monkeys. And this was a behavioral ecology research project, so understanding their hierarchy and who's grooming who and who's mating with who and so on. Occasionally, and increasingly over time, I would go find my monkey group in the morning and find that an individual was missing. And we never found that individual again. And then weeks or months would go by and another individual would go missing. And again, we'd never find them again. And it became clear over time that these individuals were being poached by local people who regarded them as pest species because they were raiding crops. This was a really seminal experience for me and really informed the rest of my career. I decided that as intellectually rewarding and interesting and fulfilling as it can be to follow individuals around and learn more about their behavioral ecology and the day-to-day intimacy of their lives, it all feels for naught if you're following them into oblivion, if you're just watching them disappear. So I decided I really wanted to be at this interface of people and wildlife. I also decided, as much as I love my monkeys, that if I'm going to study an animal, it better be one I don't mind watching all day, every day. And that certainly would describe elephants. I never get tired of watching elephants, being near them. I'm sure you can all relate to how deeply interesting they are. They're deeply feeling, they're deeply intelligent, social, and it's just magical to be in their presence, especially in the wild. And in terms of conflict with people, there's probably no species that has greater conflict with the people that they encounter on the landscape. Almost anywhere you see humans and elephants coexisting, they're coming into conflict. Human-elephant conflict is generally characterized by the problem of elephants raiding the crops of subsistence farmers. It can certainly entail other things, but that's generally what I work on and is the most common problem that you find with between people and elephants. That raiding of crops makes elephants very vulnerable to poaching, and of course incentivizes people to kill them. And this is an individual that was not killed for its ivory, but this is actually a photo I took of an elephant after it had been killed crop raiding. So this was the problem I wanted to work on. I didn't have a project site. I basically was cold calling researchers across East Africa to see if they needed someone to come out and study human-elephant conflict. And I got a bite from someone working in Ruaha National Park. He was working for a large NGO out there running this landscape program. So to orient you, this is, of course, Africa, East Africa. This is Tanzania. Within Tanzania, this is Ruaha National Park. So in the south central part of the country, not nearly the infrastructure you have in place up in the northern region where you find the Serengeti and Ngorongoro crater. There's just not a lot of infrastructure down here or down in Ruaha. Certainly less so back then. But I finally got my field site. So I ran out there my first field season, started doing interviews like this. Within a few months of my arrival, a big political drama unfolded, and long story short, this guy who invited me out was forced to leave the country very abruptly. And with him went all of my support, my funding support, logistical support, intellectual support, gone. So I'm out here on my own, but I've already started my interviews. I've already sort of gotten invested in this site. And so I pulled together a few little scholarships from my university, Colorado State University, just to keep limping along for a short time until I could find a longer term solution. So I was doing interviews with local people and collecting data on human-elephant conflict events in the study area. At that time, I think I was just in about 8 villages. And so this is one of my first interviews. This is my field assistant and still my dear friend Asha, who's an amazing interpreter. And the story of, I start this way, talking with people and understanding people's experience with elephants and their experience generally living in these communities, because the story of conservation is really the story about people, at least as much as it is about the whatever it is you're trying to protect or conserve. That is because, whatever you're trying to protect, elephants or monkeys or whatever, they're not in crisis because they suddenly don't know how to live in the forest or they don't know how to live on the landscape on the savanna. They're in crisis because of the people they're encountering. So people are the solution, right? So my view is it is essential that we include people in the process of conservation and developing the solutions around conservation. So this is how I started, talking with people, understanding their experiences. And this is one farmer that we were interviewing. He was actually living on his farm at the time, which is common. That's why he's not in his Sunday best here. He's living on the farm because during the day he's defending his farm against monkeys and birds, and at night he's defending it against elephants. And you can imagine how, if you can place yourself there for a moment, you're outside defending all the food your family is going to eat against the largest land animal on Earth. Pretty scary. And that's what people do. This is one family's entire harvest for the year. And so it's common, this is one way of drying your maize just in front of your home like this. So this is their entire harvest for the entire year. This is what they have to feed their family. So again, imagine this is all in the field and vulnerable to elephants. How terrifying and terrorizing that must be. It's hard to imagine why anyone would want to protect elephants in this context, right? So this is the problem really of human-elephant conflict. So I came back out my second field season. I had given my personal bank card to this gentleman, Julius, to pay our field assistants with very little. We were very lean. I was, teaching biology classes and taking student loans, and we were just as tight as you can imagine. And so I came out for my second field season, and I just wanted to thank all of our staff for just staying committed to the project, continuing to collect these data with so much integrity, working so hard, and I wanted to bring everyone to the park just to say thank you. That was it. And I had one field assistant at the time. He's not pictured here, and I won't share his name, but remember, all of our field staff are from these villages. They're farmers themselves. So they're experiencing the same things that the people we're interviewing are experiencing. Crop raiding, occasionally people getting killed. This one field assistant particularly hated elephants, absolutely hated them. And I had to stop having him translate for me because he would get the interviewee so riled up because he hated elephants more than anyone we interviewed. Because again, he was a farmer and someone in his village had actually been killed by an elephant. At the end of these 2 days of bringing our staff to the park, this one field assistant, I will never forget him at the end of the day saying, "Oh my gosh, what is inside the park is amazing. We have to tell everyone what's inside the park. We have to tell them about these elephants are so peaceful inside the park. These elephants belong to us, and we have to tell everyone about it." And I'll never forget him saying, "These elephants belong to us." And I thought, whoa, what a travesty is it that all these people living around the park who bear the exclusive entire burden of living with elephants never get to experience anything positive about coexisting with them. They never get to have a positive experience with them. Why would anyone want to protect them or think of them in a positive way? So at the end of the couple days of taking everyone to the park, we sat down together and devised this park visitation program together. The logistics of it, how we would select people randomly, how we'd get them there, and so on. We were all very excited about it. We had zero money, no idea how I was going to fund this thing. But we had the idea and we were determined. Eventually, I was able to source this vehicle from another student at my university. I drove it all the way from Arusha down here to Ruaha. This was definitely at the end of its life. It broke down constantly. The roads in Ruaha are notoriously rough, even by Tanzanian standards, and these doors literally rattled off the body of the car. We actually literally tied them with ropes to the body of the car to keep it physically intact so people wouldn't fall out. And this is what we used for our park visitation program for the first several years. And we spent a lot of time doing this, changing tires, dealing with flat tires and so on. But we were making a difference. We were running a great program. I was funding it by, at that time, recruiting international volunteers who wanted field experience to get into graduate school usually, using those fees to pay for the program and pay our staff. And so that's who this woman was. And she was great, and a lot of them were great. But it wasn't enough, and we were just constantly very lean and very tight. It just wasn't enough money. Meanwhile, I saw something happening with our elephants. The most recent elephant census had been completed in 2009. We're probably in, 2010, 2011 into 2012 now, and we're hearing more and more about ivory moving between the villages from inside the park into the villages and outside the villages, more carcasses being found. It was clear that elephant poaching was intensifying. I was the only person in the entire landscape working on elephants. At this time, it was presumed this was the second largest elephant population in East Africa. It was second to Salou, but that population was so decimated, Ruaha became the largest population and still is in East Africa. The next census, sure enough, in 2013 showed a decline from almost 35,000 to 20,000, so precipitous decline. And here in 2014, we see the numbers really are crashing. And this is, again, I'm the only one out there. I think around this time or close to this time, another project started working out there, but the pressure was intense. The pressure was intense to do something about this. And when we spoke to our communities, to educate them, to, create awareness around the fact that elephants were crashing, because there was no reason for people to think the elephant populations were in trouble. Elephants are coming to the farms. That's as much as people knew. So we're creating awareness around this and literally saying, do you want to be the generation that kills the last elephant? Because that's what we're on our way to doing. I was also, going broke. Blood, sweat, and tears for sure went into this project, and year after year applied for funding, year after year, just couldn't get a nibble. And finally, so I'll complete the story here. In 2015, we see the numbers rebound a bit, but look at our standard error. In other words, look at the population estimate range is really broad. So the standard error is quite large, meaning this number is not entirely reliable. Did indicate a rebound, and I don't have this data to share, but the most recent data do show that the numbers have stabilized around 20,000 or so. And we very rarely hear about ivory moving through the communities any longer. So the populations have stabilized. But at this time, it was a very scary time. And this year in 2015, I finally got our first big award. And we were able to buy this new to us safari truck and really sort of formalize this program and offer this park visitation program to local people. And it is, we had several hundred people from each village vying for the 10 spots we could allocate to people in this truck. Extremely popular. And there's nothing more beautiful. I very rarely went to the park because I wouldn't want to take a spot. I just went just to take photos for our donors. But there's nothing more beautiful than seeing people's joy at seeing their own elephants for the first time in their lives, which is an experience they should be having their whole life, right? It's honestly the most inspiring and beautiful thing you can do. So lots and lots of park visits for people to experience their own wildlife and experiencing it in a positive way. Here are just a few comments from participants. So we asked people at the end of the trip, how was it for you? Basically, what did you think? How do you feel about the park now? How do you feel about elephants? I feel good now about protecting elephants because I see they are not my enemy. Continuing this park visitation program is important because it will help to change attitudes from hating to loving animals. We are 100% supposed to protect elephants so we can continue seeing them, because like me, I never saw elephants before today. And that's common. A lot of times people have heard of elephants or eating crops, but they've never seen them in person, even though they live right next to the boundary. I feel good about protecting wild animals because I could not have seen them today if poachers had killed them. Elephants should be protected for the benefit of the next generation instead of hearing only stories about them from other people or our parents. And this is something that they know happened with rhinos. Rhinos used to exist in Ruaha. They no longer do. And so people don't want to see that happen to elephants as well. I want elephants to be protected because I would like my daughter to see them. Who can't relate to that? Never give up delivering this program because it liberates people from poor knowledge and it gives us skills on how to serve the environment in Tanzania. I mean, you couldn't make this up. These comments are just so inspiring and beautiful. Over the years, and mostly with those two little trucks, we have, and I think this is a slight underestimate, reached 5,723 people from 29 villages and offered park visitation for them. I'll say that we don't have money at the moment to do the park visitation program. As you've probably heard, funding across the board is extremely tight right now, but it's something I very much wish to restart in the future. Beehive fences, this is definitely something we're continuing at the moment. Someone named Lucy King from Save the Elephants observed in the wild, elephants naturally avoid bees. And this makes sense, right? So a swarm of bees inside the very sensitive tissue of an elephant's trunk would be a disaster. So in the wild, when they hear bees or smell them, they're out of there. And so she devised this really ingenious solution of building these beehive fences that are strung together between these wooden posts and then connected by wire. And when the idea is when elephants approach the fence, touch the wire, it disturbs the hive and the bees start swarming and the elephants run away. We found that elephants don't need to approach the fence they just smell it, and that's enough. We often even can use dummy hives interspersed with the log hives. And they've been very, very, very effective. And actually, I'll say this is what we call a long fence. So it took us some time for sure to convince people that elephants would run away from bees. It was hard to imagine. So we had to pilot these over the years on small farms, and now over time, people have seen how effective they are, and we have enough buy-in, enough community support that we can build these really long beehive fences, several hundred meters long, that some protect several hundred farms at one time. A few comments from farmers who have beehive fences. Before the fence, I had a problem with hunger because elephants were destroying most of my crops and the leftovers weren't enough to feed my family. Whenever I heard about elephants, I became very upset because I knew they would destroy my crops. Now I feel differently about elephants because they only come to drink water and then go back. This is one of the requirements we have for beehive fences, so they can't block water sources. So very often elephants will come to the water source, drink water, and instead of opportunistically then raiding crops, which is what they would otherwise do, they turn around. So people get to actually watch the elephants from the safety of behind the fence. And now suddenly it's interesting and enjoyable for them. I'm benefiting 100% because before the fence, most of my crops were destroyed by elephants. We were living by waiting for the government for help that never came. Now I think this fence is the solution. I depend exclusively on farming, and my crops were raided 3 years in a row, but now they don't raid at all. Before, I was expecting to be compensated by the government, but that never came. Now, when I hear about elephants, I am not afraid because they will just drink water and go back. Currently, at this moment, our beehive fences are protecting 1,579 individual family farms. We have had a couple of long fences destroyed over the years by flooding. So this number would otherwise be much higher, but that's what we're able to protect at this moment and building more all the time. Thank you, IEF. We also have a teacher training program. This developed really organically early on when we were doing the park visitation program. We thought, well, we should visit schools and just let the students know what we're doing, what kind of work we're doing out here. And then over time, when we still had the volunteer program, I had volunteers, all of whom were trained biologists and ecologists, write a conservation education curriculum for primary school students. So we've got several modules, including introduction to the environment, biodiversity, mammals and birds, elephant ecology, human-wildlife coexistence, climate change, trees, water, soil, sustainable agriculture, and human health. So we developed this whole curriculum, and for the first 2 years or 3 years or so, our staff, really just Felisto, who you'll see here, delivered the curriculum himself in the schools. And then over time, we started training teachers to develop the curriculum. We have a lot of support from local teachers and village leaders to do this because it supports student learning in other areas, including geography and math and science. And Felisto visits regularly just to offer support to the teachers and do these little fun quizzes with the kids. As you can see, they're all excited to answer. We do measure student performance through pre and post tests, little quizzes we give before and after each module. Across all these schools, you can see how many students are in a single classroom. On average, the performance on pre-tests is around 20%, and on post-tests, it's around 80%. And this is reflective of not only how well the teachers are doing delivering the curriculum and the students are absorbing it, but also how little exposure students get to this material otherwise, evidenced by the low performance on the pre-tests. Since we started the teacher training program and teachers have been delivering the curriculum, we have reached 12,005 standard 6 students. So our aim is to reach every primary school student in the entire landscape, and we're growing that number all the time. Currently, we have 52 teachers reaching approximately 3,000 students per year. We also have these film nights, and this is an opportunity for us to reach several hundred people at one time. Usually 200 to 300 people will come for a film night, and this is where we just set up in the center of a village. We make announcements in the afternoon that we're doing this, And we show films in Kiswahili about elephant ecology, conservation, and so on. People are very excited, and as I said, we always have high attendance. It's always a bit tricky to take photos because it's dark. But at the end of the film, we don't just show films and go home. At the end of the film, we facilitate a conversation. After seeing films about elephant ecology and elephant conservation and poaching and what's happening in other parts of Africa, we ask questions. What do you think? What do you want to see happen in your own community? What do you think is happening to our elephants here? What should we do about it? And last year, we have a number of stories like this, but I'll share one from last year. A gentleman stood up in the middle of that conversation, stood up in front of his whole community and said, I am a poacher and I don't want to be a poacher anymore. I don't want to contribute to this anymore. And I pledge to you, I'm going to give you all my snare. I'm going to go into the bush and collect all my snares and collect all my paraphernalia. And he did over the next several days. He found our staff and he handed it all over. We've had a number of people come forward after also park visitation program and say and do similar things. And I have to share that in the beginning, in 2008, when I was collecting these interview data, no one would acknowledge that poaching existed in their communities because to do so was very risky. It was it endangered your life to acknowledge it. So the fact that people actually stand up in front of their community and say, I'm a poacher is incredible. It's an incredible paradigm shift. Over the years, we have hosted 280 film nights and reached conservatively about 56,000 people. We also offer alternative livelihood programming. So this is a bit newer in the last few years, but really important, very popular. So this is an opportunity for people to diversify their income stream, their household income in ways that do not put them in conflict with elephants. You have an opportunity to get protein, so it also removes the incentive to poach for bushmeat, to kill wildlife for bushmeat, and also to buy it because you've got protein that's legal, that's safe, and that brings you income. So usually there's a combination, depending on what people want to do and what we've got funding for, a combination of chicken keeping, goat keeping, and beekeeping. As I said, the last time we held a community meeting of introducing this program, we had 400 people show up. Before we actually offer the program to families, we require that everyone attend every single training on every single livelihood opportunity. So they have to learn all about goat husbandry, all about chicken keeping, all about beekeeping, because we don't know what we'll have funding for necessarily. And we always have the problem that we have more people attending all those trainings than we have money to support for alternative livelihoods. I will say we have yet to actually turn anyone away. We just sort of find it somehow, but very popular and really important. Really important. This is just a photo of, this is one of our field assistants collecting data on human-elephant conflict events. So this is less maybe sexy and exciting, but very, very important to collect these data to understand where the raiding is taking place on the landscape, which villages are hotspots, where in the villages are hotspots, so we know where to put the fences. And we have a coordinator, Casey, who understands very well elephant movements across the landscape because he manages these programs. So this helps us target and measure our impact. And lastly, I'll just say, we've obviously been here many years, and a big part of success, ingredient for success is, of course, building trust. We are embedded in these communities. We don't live in town and then come to the villages to do work. No, our camp is in the village. We live there. Our staff, everyone except me and one other staff members from northern Tanzania, are from these villages. So, when someone has a problem, if floods have been devastating to communities or families, we show up. We help in what ways we can. If we're asked to attend a college graduation, we go. If we're asked to help with something, we come. We show up, and we've spent many years building trust with communities such that When we say, hey, we've got funding to build a beehive fence, we've got people built ready to go and trusting us to support them. And so I'll say that if there's one thing I hope you'll take away from this talk, it is that as intuitive and perhaps obvious as it at first feels to blame local people for poaching crises when they happen, those local people who are recruited to poach elephants at great personal cost, potentially to themselves, are not the enemy. I hope you've seen how nuanced this is, how difficult it is to coexist on the landscape with elephants. And our organization, Wildlife Connection, is devoted to creating opportunities for people to peacefully coexist with elephants, live and thrive, and allow their children to thrive in coexistence with elephants. And so with that, I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. People are already loving everything that you're talking about. Lots of interest in the beehive fencing strategies. Maybe you can talk to us a little bit more about how those work and like what kind of factors need to be in place for a beehive fence to be effective? Because we've seen a lot of them implemented in places where they don't work.
Interesting. I haven't experienced that. We are very thoughtful, as I sort of alluded to, about which farms are going to get fences. Firstly, they can't be brand new farms that are the result of clear cutting. They have to be a certain number of years old. I think we've put it at 5 years old at this point. They cannot block water sources. So very often farms are getting raided because elephants are coming to a water source that's adjacent to the farm, and that's why the farm is there, because it's near water. Everyone wants to be near water. But we will not block that water source. So elephants have to be able to safely access that water. Usually it's a river. And then the fence will be set back, several feet, and it works. So that's a very important, you can't block elephants from what they need. And they need water. The other thing is we won't block known corridors. So if there's a known corridor, we actually work with local communities to open up those corridors and offer, hey, we'll build a beehive fence over here, knowing elephants don't access this area, if you can leave this known corridor open. And that's been really effective. And we'll also offer livelihood programs and just sort of generally partner with those villages to support them to coexist with elephants.
Excellent.
I'll say one more thing. I'm so sorry to interrupt. One more thing is I think one big reason why it perhaps isn't successful is because the people who are benefiting directly, they must be invested in maintaining that fence. So they have to help build it and they have to help maintain it.
That is a great point. That's very important. People are asking, what is the proportion of farmers in your region that are adopting this technique, and what is the average cost per farmer?
So the beehive fences, we use log hives instead of the more sophisticated style of Kenyan top bar and long straw hives because they are a lot cheaper. We have had farmers who we've helped to start a fence, extend it themselves. We haven't had a whole lot of farmers initiate them themselves. So we found that in general, people usually need our support to continue initiating them. There's so many farms, I can't give you an actual ratio. We did recently have an experience, and it's uncommon, but it does happen, where we offered a long fence and it just became clear over time that the people who were gonna have to maintain it just weren't gonna show up and do it. And so, it doesn't always work for that reason. We didn't even build it for that reason. So I'm sorry, I can't offer a proportion, but I'll say that where we have built them, they've all been successful.
That's important. Well, you have the criteria set up for the follow through to make sure that they are successful, and that's what's key. So what kind of costs are do they sell the honey from these bees?
Yes. So early on, we really wanted to make it a priority to create marketable honey. And in that case, we can't use log hives. We need the more sophisticated Kenyan topper hives. We found that it was just very laborious, and sometimes we're able to produce enough honey to sell, but in some cases this has become so popular that I don't know, we've just had trouble selling it to the expat communities and so on. But locally, certainly people sell honey, and they absolutely make income off of that within their communities.
Excellent. And have you seen elephants actually challenge the fence, or what can you talk about what that looks like?
Yes, they have early on, they when they encountered the fence, they just encounter it and turn back. Um, we did have at one time the wire between the hives was too low, and a juvenile got underneath it. And then, you're not going to stop a mama elephant when she wants to do something. So she got in, and, that this was several years ago, so I can't remember exactly the details, but, she got her baby out. But yeah, those are the only incidents I can think of.
Absolutely. Well, don't get between a mama and her baby.
Nope.
Uh, any challenges such as theft of beehives or rates of bees occupying the hives or abandoning the hives?
Sure, yes, that can be a challenge, especially with rainfall being really unpredictable. But that's more an issue when people are trying to use beekeeping as an alternative livelihood, and that's another reason we've stopped using the expensive hives. So yeah, definitely most of the hives I would say aren't occupied at any given time, but even just a few of them being occupied is enough to deter elephants. We have had problems, not so much of people stealing the hives, but there's been some conflict between the farmers and the pastoralists if people want to graze their cows onto someone's farm, and then it gets in the way of the fence. So we've had to sort of negotiate solutions whereby we might take down the fence during the dry season. So it depends on the community and the people involved.
Makes sense. Um, Pivoting away from the beehive fences, someone is saying, I have a question regarding the data cited. It shows a significant decline in the elephant population in 2014, followed by a slight increase in 2015. Could you elaborate on many of the factors that could have contributed to the decline and the subsequent recovery, or do you have any data about that?
Yeah, so um, going back a bit further, if you can visualize, and I debated offering this graph, I already had so many slides, but if you can visualize a graph of the African elephant population, starting maybe 100 years ago, the graph, the numbers start up here. I've seen numbers anywhere between 4 million and 10 million individuals 100 years ago. It's been precipitous decline like this until about 1990, early 90s. That is because in 1989, the CITES, the Convention on the International Trade of Endangered Species, banned the international trade of ivory. That caused a rebound. There's a lag time, right? Because elephant gestation is 22 months. It takes a long time. It takes some time for the population to recover, but it did begin to. So obviously it hasn't gone back up to 10 million, but it's kind of went up here. In 2008, I believe it was, CITES allowed a one-off sale of ivory from a few African nations to a couple of Asian nations because they had all this stockpiled ivory, and it was thought to be a way to, we can funnel this money into conservation. That immediately triggered there's no longer now a taboo to buy ivory. No one knows what's legal and what's not legal. Now we just have ivory. It was illegally done, and now that's caused a huge resurgence in poaching and a huge new demand for ivory. And so that's where we saw our elephant population starting to crash again. And Ruaha was a hotbed for poaching, both before the 1989 decision and then after the one-off sale. And then there were, of course, everyone became aware, probably most people on this call are aware of the elephant poaching crisis that was happening in the early 2010s. I'll just say there was a response by the Tanzanian government. There was a response by the international community. Eventually, China banned the internal sale of ivory as well, which helped tremendously. So yeah, those pieces went into place. It's also a little bit a game of whack-a-mole. So, they tamped down poaching in Tanzania and it popped up in other parts of Africa. But in general, populations have stabilized for the time being. They've stabilized at lower numbers than they were. That's important because we get another poaching crisis. Once again, we're starting at even lower numbers, but hopefully that answered your question.
Absolutely. Thank you. So moving on to your community outreach, parks visitation, what kind of costs are involved in the parks visitation program? What are your needs to get that going again?
Our primary need to get that going again is a vehicle. And vehicles are expensive. Fuel's expensive. We had expanded that in like a couple of years ago, we had expanded it to not just communities nearby our camp, but communities quite far, still close to the park boundary, but far from the park entrance. And it's expensive to reach them. But yeah, I would say the primary cost is a vehicle. I think that we could, without too much trouble, get funding to support the program if we had the vehicle.
Okay, that's good to know. Um, and then this is obviously inspiring young generations of hopefully future conservationists. So, do you have any examples of kids who have grown up and maybe pursued careers in conservation because of this work?
That's a great question. I wish I'd love to follow the kids that we reach in the primary schools because by now a lot of them have grown up. We have had a few students actually volunteer with us. What am I saying? We've had a number of students volunteer with us, um, which is beautiful. I don't know that it was because they were touched by our programming. That's a good question. We don't follow the students we reach during primary school, but we've had a lot of volunteers in the community actually volunteer on our project, which is not a very common thing to do in Tanzania, volunteering. Usually, if you're working, it's to survive. So I personally find it inspiring just for young people to actually offer that up. But it's a good question. I can't say that I know that I have tracked that exactly.
But you've inspired them to get involved, and that's really important. That means you touch them. So
Yeah, thank
excellent.
you.
Um, question about the film nights. Where do you get your films that you show? Are they just elephant films, wildlife films? Do they have a message? What can you tell us about them?
Yeah, so I'm blanking on the name of the organization that provided the films that we most often show. Several years ago, we sourced them. I shared them with you. I don't know if you perhaps
Yeah.
recall the name, but it's tough to find them in Swahili, and very few people are going to speak English, so they must be in Swahili. So there was an organization, I don't know if it's still in operation, that provided films for this purpose in multiple languages, including Swahili. And so we use those. They are about a number of things. There's one on elephant ecology. There is one on the elephant poaching crisis. I think that takes place in Kenya. We also, several years ago, were very fortunate to recruit a few volunteers. That's when I was still doing volunteer program, who were filmmakers. And they came out and put together a little film about the Ruaha elephants and the communities that we work in coexisting with elephants. And they put it to this incredible music that is produced by our local communities. And that's incredibly popular. And I shared that one with you as well. It's only a little 15-minute film, but people love watching it. Um, and it's just the general message. It's about how to coexist with elephants. One
Awesome.
thing I've learned though, I think AI now will translate. So I'd love to get some of the incredible, nature films we have access to translated into Swahili using AI. That's kind of on my radar.
That's a great idea. Yeah. Well, we're in a new world with AI these days,
Yes.
um, which maybe this could help. Someone's asking if you collaborate with any Tanzanian universities or grad students, postdoc students to assess the impact of the effectiveness of the different HEC deterrent measures, but also you could have a grad student use AI to translate.
Yeah. Good idea. Um, so our field site manager, Zablon, he's just wrapping up his master's degree. So he's been doing some work. I need to publish on my own research out there. We haven't had a lot of researchers come out, but I'm certainly open to it. Yeah, we have had a couple. but not a whole lot over time. Yeah. This is a real deficit of mine, is publishing. I need to really be better about that.
Well, I think you have your hands full, but I think everyone always has extra things they need to publish. It seems to be a common thread with all of our chats.
Okay.
So I think I know the answer. And just to preface this, for everyone watching, if you're not aware, the US government, the US Fish and Wildlife Service has put a hold on grant funds. So a lot of conservation organizations are really looking for funding and are kind of down to bare bones at the moment and for the foreseeable future until something changes. And so someone's asking, given the severity of the problem in the region, are there any plans to expand your work to other areas that are affected, but obviously without sufficient funding?
Yeah, I mean, before this really collapse in funding, we were in the process of that and had expanded from what we call Iringa District, the communities that border the park and are located some fairly close to the park entrance, to communities on the north and south that still border the park but are quite far from the entrance. So experience the same levels of human-elephant conflict, but basically no services. We're still expanded into those regions, but it's tough right now, right? Because we are pretty bare bones. I have been asked that question before. I think if we can get deeply into those communities, and really embed ourselves in all the communities around Ruaha, then maybe we'll think about moving into other areas. But it's important, and something we learn constantly is, just because communities are even located right next to each other, the challenges, the culture, the attitudes can be quite different. So it's not simple to just enter a new area. You really have to spend a lot of time doing what we've done, which is to build trust and develop relationships with people before you can really start programming. And that takes time. So I'm not closed to it. If anyone has a whole lot of money they want to share, I'm ready to jump in. But yeah, right now it's not on the immediate future.
And that makes a lot of sense. And it segues into my next question is, if you were to expand, because you are so embedded in the community, you're integrated with them, how would you accomplish that? You just have to staff up?
Yeah, so always start with finding people in those communities to work with. So finding basically ambassadors in the community where you want to work, and takes time. I mean, this is just not quick work. It takes time, just like it does in your own personal work relationships. It takes time to build trust. And here you're asking people to trust you with their lives, in some cases, certainly their livelihood. So first step is always to, if you don't know anyone in the community, start with the village leader and ask them to recommend someone who is, a hard worker, wants to, maybe has gone to secondary school or is just particularly ambitious, and start meeting people and see who you, to use today's vernacular, vibe with, and get, to build relationships over time. And then that, as you build trust with that person or those people will start to become your ambassadors in the community, and you can start offer programming. And then we always bring people, from one village to another. For example, people who are benefiting from a beehive fence into a community where we're introducing it, to explain how it's working for them. Same with the livelihood programming. So a lot of information sharing that way.
And that's really interesting because bringing those success stories in to share with everyone is very similar to bringing them into the parks and seeing the successful, peaceful life of wildlife that's separated from the conflict with the villages. It's two sides of the same coin, and it's in a way.
Mhm.
Maybe you can talk a little bit more about that, how you inspire people by seeing wildlife outside of that adversarial relationship. Because I think people often think, well, we just need to separate people and wildlife completely.
Mhm.
And that's not how you're making such great strides.
Yeah, that's a very conventional conservation strategy. And it's the, you know, it's been successful in a lot of cases in the United States, right? The creating national parks and national park boundaries. But in places in Africa where it's really been imposed on people, starting with colonialism, from my view, it's just deeply unjust, um, and it doesn't work. People are people. People are the same everywhere. And when I first wanted to start that park visitation program, the pushback I got from everyone, including people in authority, people in positions of authority in Tanzania, was, oh, adults won't care about the park. They won't care. Bring the kids. You can go ahead and bring the kids, but adults don't care. Do you care? You care. We are the same. And that's why we saw people stand up in the truck during park trips and say, calling out other people in the truck and saying, hey, John, you're poaching these elephants. You feel good about that? You want to keep that up? Really holding each other to account. I just think this is one of the deep lessons you learn from when you're traveling and you spend a lot of time in other cultures generally, which is that people are the same. We're all motivated by the same things. And if you and I are motivated by just the magical experience of being in the presence of elephants, so are they. So just sort of remember one another's humanity.
Absolutely. And even though you can't physically fit everyone in that safari vehicle, they all go back to their communities and share
Yes.
what they've learned, right?
That's a very important point. Thank you for bringing that up because, again, I didn't want to share a bunch of data slides, but I am actually working on publishing this because we did several hundred interviews in one village where we offered the program and one village where we did not. And we looked at the responses of people who both knew someone who visited the park but didn't go themselves, and visited the park themselves and didn't know anyone and didn't go themselves. The people who knew someone who visited the park were almost, in some cases, more supportive of elephant conservation than the people who visited the park because they had heard all about it. And they're like, oh my God, that sounds incredible. So it really shows that, yeah, you don't have to actually bring every single individual into the park to create this sort of a paradigm shift within the community. But just awareness, you can create that awareness by bringing a certain number, proportion of people into the park such that they can reach everyone, um, as ambassadors, basically. But yeah, that's a very important point.
That's wonderful. We have a suggestion that maybe the African Elephant Specialist Group might be able to help translate those films.
Hmm.
So something to consider. I know
Okay.
they have that toolkit that gets distributed, so this could be something that would be helpful in that.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I will definitely look into it.
You never know.
Will
Uh,
do.
but I think that we are out of questions. So if you have any more, if there's anything else we haven't covered, let us know. Otherwise, thank you so much. This was so informative. Everyone is just giving you praise. They love your matter-of-fact way of laying things out and really explaining human elephant conflict and the work you're doing. And I think you've got a bunch of fans now that
Oh, wonderful. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate everyone coming to the talk today and taking the time to learn about our work. I'm working on being a better Facebook poster and social media person. I'm hoping to put together a newsletter, so please give us a follow on social media. Thank you, International Elephant Foundation. Truly, we wouldn't be here talking if it weren't for your support. It's really keeping us going here. And so thank you all. Thank you.
thank you. Julie, let me throw it back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. And Sarah, what a wonderful presentation. I really enjoyed it. I'd like to invite everybody to turn your cameras on and let's give Sarah a big round of applause for this wonderful presentation. It was very informative.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And for those of you who would like to support Sarah's work, we put the link in the chat. So maybe there'll be some people who will want to support your work after they found out more about what you're doing. So
Wonderful.
thank you again for tuning in with us. And I also want to remind everybody that our next chat will be coming up July 22nd at the same time. And we're going to be featuring Susie Weeks from Mount Kenya Trust, July 22nd. So hopefully we'll see you all again live next month. And until then, I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.